Cease to amaze me that that happens. I can't believe it. That's 50 years ago. And here they are, people today still enjoying that show and thinking about it and still remember me from something that long ago. It's frightening when you think about it. It really is. But I'm thrilled. Number one, you know, both the Laramie and Wagon Train are out on DVD now, and we're getting a whole new audience of young kids today that are getting to see something worthwhile for a change on television, if I may add. And I'm getting fan mail now from girls 16, 17, 18 years old that are watching the show now saying how thrilling it is to watch a decent show with a good theme and a story behind it and clean. Started as a dancer. I got in the business in 1952 as an extra. You know, just walking behind scenes, doing whatever. My first picture I worked on was called Above and Beyond with Eleanor Parker and Robert Taylor, and I was a soldier that marched. But my dad and my parents were dancers. And my dad immediately, when we moved to California in 1950, got into the picture business as a dancer, chorus dancer, in the background stuff. But he danced in practically every musical ever made until he passed away retired in the 80s. And he was one of the famous dancers of all time. So anyway, I was making $12.05 a day as an extra, which isn't bad. I had just left I was the doorman at Grumman's Chinese Theater making 35 cents an hour. So this beat this a little bit. And of course I get overtime, you get a bump, and I made more money. But my dad, as a dancer, would get on these dance movies, and they do 3 or 4 dance numbers in a movie in those days with Gene Kelly and all those people. And it took 2 months to do one number. So he did real well. And he said, why don't you go on a dance interview one time? You know how to dance a little bit, you get some rhythm. So I went on, the first one I went on was called I Love Melvin with Debbie Reynolds and Donald O'Connor. And went in, and there was 60 dancers in there, and they in a big line. And this dance director, Robert Alton, one of the famous dance directors of all time, he already knew who he wanted. He picked out his dancers. He'd, been a dance director for 50 years. But anyway, he came to me and he said, "You're new in this business." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You can dance?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, do a time step for me." So I went out and, did something like that. And he said, "Okay." And then he finally came back at the end of it, and he said, "Look," he said, "I've got all the people filled out. I can't use you now, but, in another movie maybe." And he said, "All right, everybody dismissed." And as we started to walk out, the assistant director came up and he said, "Wait, you forgot the acrobatic number. We need people that can do acrobatics." And I could. And he finally came back and he said, "Do you do any acrobatics?" And I said, "What do you want?" And he said, do a backflip and a handspring," which I did just like that. And he said, "Okay, put him down for the acrobatic number. It'd be the last thing we shoot in the movie, down the road sometime." I went home that night, got a phone call, said, "Report to work the next morning." I danced at every number in the picture, and it was great. I made $200 a week, 3 weeks rehearsal, a week to shoot it. So I did quite a bit of that, And then, of course, comedies came into town, and we had an hour, and NBC wanted to take an hour away and put 2 half-hour comedies in there, which they did. And the 2 half-hour comedies didn't even last a half a season. They made a big mistake there. Laramie could probably have gone another maybe 2 seasons or something like that. But in my case, I was very lucky. The second it ended, they said, "Would you mind going into Wagon Train, playing Cooper Smith? They'll create a new role for me." Well, of course, John McIntyre, who was a dear friend and a great actor, and I knew Frankie and Terry and all those guys anyway, I jumped at the chance.
Yeah, you did the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and the first color season, hour and a half, 90-minute shows, which, was kind of new in those days. Saturday afternoon, are you kidding? I was living in Miami, Florida when I was, 10, 11, 12, whatever like that. And I'd go to the matinee every day, and I'd watch Don Redberry, Bob Steele, all of those old cowboys like that. I loved it. Sit there 3 times, watch the movies 3 times or whatever. Little did I dream that probably less than 15 years later, I'd be working with Bob Steele and Johnny McBrown and Don Redberry. Unbelievable. Here I walk on a set, and there he is, one of my idols.
Right.
And we're of our country, the West, the 1800s, and the cowboys and the bandits and the Indians and that type of thing. And I mean, my friend, I've got friends in Japan and Germany and England that just love watching Westerns. It just means so much to them. And then we have our people in this country right here that love them. And it's a mystique that's gone now, unfortunately, for most people.
Yeah. What do you think the future of the Western holds?
For television, I don't think there's any future. There's no. First of all, most of the actors in Hollywood right now can't spell horse, and are all liberals anyway. So, but I just thought I'd throw that in. There's no directors alive anymore that could direct a good Western. There's no writers. That's the most important thing, having a good writer to write your Western. The only ones that are left alive, Paul Savage, but Paul's in his 90s. And even if he wrote a script, there's nobody that's going to buy it today, you know. And it would be very expensive to do a Western today. And on top of it, there's no horses anymore. You know, when we were doing all those Westerns, we had 400, 600 horses that you could ride, shoot off of, that knew a camera, stood still, did whatever you wanted to do with them. They're all gone. There's nothing like that anymore. So.
And there's no one to train them either.
No, absolutely not.
What about in film? Do you think occasionally?
Every now and then, you know, my God, we got lucky and we got Open Range. That movie, Kevin Costner and Bob Duvall, one of the best westerns one of my favorites. That's been 4 or 5 years ago, but they're far and few between.
When you got to Hollywood and met these heroes that had been your boyhood heroes, were you disappointed, or did you find that they were real?
Oh, they were great. Oh, Bob Steele. Oh, there was nobody like Bob Steele. I mean, this was a gentleman. This was a fine, fine man. Everybody loved him. No, he was what I saw up on the screen for sure. So was Don Redberry. These were good guys. These were cowboys.
Well, I think that's part of it, is that even at that time in the 50s, there was still a link to the Old West with these people. They were the sons and daughters of real cowboys that had come west, and there was that immediate link.
Absolutely. You know, Tom Mix came to Hollywood with bullet holes in him. That's a real cowboy. They were great people.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
Tim McCoy was a war hero and a real cowboy.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no better cowboy than Joel McCrea. Has a ranch. Every movie you ever see, every Western you ever see Joel McCrea in, that's his horse. First of all, Baldy. He rode Baldy in almost all his movies. And he was the number one idol that I always wanted to meet and thought I never would or ever would get to work with him. And sure enough, God, I think I was doing Emergency at the time. My producer, John Champion, got Joel McCrea to come out of retirement to do a little movie called Mustang Country. We were going to shoot it up in Canada. Four people in the whole show. He picked myself, Patrick Wayne, Duke's youngest son, and Joel and a little Indian kid, and we did the movie. And I got to spend close to a month with Joel and Francis D. up in Canada. It's the best time of my life that you can imagine. What a man, what a gentleman, and what a sweet guy he was. Yeah.
Somebody told me that they lived out in Tarleton Oaks.
Oh yeah, they had his ranch out there.
That he rode every morning.
Oh, of course. Oh yeah. He could still hitch up into that saddle like you couldn't believe.
I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he lived on a horse. So.
He was the real deal.
Yeah, he was the real deal. And not only that, he was such a fantastic actor. He could do contemporary roles and do them very, very well. You know, that's why he was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood for a long, long time.
And very humble. I met his son one time.
Which? Jody?
Jody.
Yeah, well, I worked with Jody, yeah.
Anyhow.
How much cowboy training was there if you came as an actor and couldn't rope or shoot or ride and so forth? How did the studios work with that and give guys like that training?
We never had anything like that in my time. Maybe back in, Robert Taylor's time at MGM or something, when they had those stock contract things, somebody did that. Chuck, I said, taught me how to draw a gun. Didn't take very long. I wanted to do it. I had the feel for it. Taught me, of course, to ride the horse and all of that. But it's an interesting thing because people from New York or different parts of the country would come to do a Western, like Bruce Dern, a lot of those actors that did work on Laramie, Warren Oates. Bruce Dern tells a great story because 32 Westerns go in at prime time, so everybody was going to work on a Western. But when you walked into the casting director's office or the producer, he would say, "Can you ride a horse?" And the actor would say, "Well, not really. Next." So you would say, "Sure, I can ride." Bruce Dern tells the story, and he couldn't spell horse. The producer said, "Can you ride?" He said, "Like the wind." Got the part. Laramie fell off the horse 6 times the first day. So did Warren Oates. I mean, it was a wreck. You couldn't believe it, some of these guys. But they did so many Westerns that they learned how to ride. Pretty good.
And like you said, the cast horses were...
Oh yeah, they were great horses. And, I'll tell you a funny story. There's a great actor, he's passed away since now, but his name was Dennis Patrick. And he was a character actor, and he did quite a few Laramies and wagon trains and became a good friend. But the very first day I ever met him, came on the set of Laramie. I happened to be I was out in the back lot by the ranch, and I was sitting in my chair reading a script, and I saw this new actor walk onto the set, and he walked up to our head wrangler, Richie Brim. And I overheard this conversation. He said, you're the head wrangler, Richie Brim. And he said, yes. He said, I have to tell you, he said, I'm not a very, very good horseman. So if you could possibly put me on a horse that's not too rough or whatever. We had a horse named Buttercup that we kept in the barn all the time for people just like that. I mean, a baby could ride on this horse without any problems. So, and I knew immediately that Richie was going to go get Buttercup. And he said, stand still, I got a horse for you right now. And he went in the barn, he saddled Buttercup, and he brought Buttercup out. I still haven't talked to this man or anything. I'm only 20 feet away. And he said, all right, step up into the saddle on me. You'll like this horse. And he put his foot up, and I said, Rich, you're not going to put him on dynamite. And he jumped back, fell on the ground. But he was a great guy. He loved it. But
So you got to meet Joel McRae. Of your other heroes, of your Western heroes, Bob Steele, obviously.
Rod Cameron. Rod Cameron was a good friend of John Champion, who produced my show, and I got to work with Rod quite a bit. There's a man who's done quite a few Westerns, and a nice man.
Just a little bit, it's off subject, but the emergency experience, was that a nice experience?
It was a great experience. Are you kidding? Getting up in the morning, going to work with Julie London? No, that was great. I loved it. Well, Julie and Bobby were old friends anyway, so I had a good time working on that show. Yeah.
Great.
One more thing, as far as asking about cowboy training, was there dialogue coaches that tried to develop a cowboy twang that people had in these shows? I mean, you mentioned New York actors. The guy with the New York accent going to be on the show and play a cowboy? Did they?
No, we didn't have anybody. We didn't have anybody like that. Not at all. No.
It was television.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It's only an hour show.
Right.
Yeah, I was telling someone I was a child actor at Review when Laramie was on. Actually, my father wrote several of Laramies.
I know.
And I'm going to see Paul Savage next week. So
Are you?
Give him your regards. Yeah.
Oh, we'll give him my very, very best. Yes, one of the best. He wrote for me better than any writer could. He knew the character Jess Harper, and he knew me, and some of my best shows were written by him. Yeah.
But my memory at Review as a 10-year-old on Riverboat was that there was a row of dressing rooms that they called Whiskey Row.
That's where my dressing room was. And the reason it was called Whiskey Row is because it was Ward Bond, Terry Wilson, Frank McGrath, John Smith, myself, and Lee Marvin. And yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad you clarified it. My mother wouldn't tell me why they called it Whiskey Row. And I think the ones across from those.
Directly across from us were 2 huge dressing rooms, one for Rock Hudson and one for Tony Curtis. I mean, they were the biggest stars at Universal at that time, and they were directly across the street. Yeah.
You guys had fun, though. I remember seeing Bert was on our show for a while. unfortunately got canned. But that whole group, Doug McClure was there, and you and John, and you guys had fun.
We had a great time. My God, well, let's see. I was 26 years old when I started Laramie. You know, we were all around the same age right there. And Bert too. You know, and of course we had fun. My God, we were kids. We were starring in shows, and but we were good. We did our job. We knew our dialogue. You know, we were one take, two take actors without a doubt. That's why we could have so much fun and get away with a lot of stuff because we did our job. Bert, it's very interesting. Before Laramie and before Riverboat, and this is probably 1958, I was starting to get a little hot in Hollywood. Got a part here, a good part here, a western here, a western there. And fan magazines were the big thing in those days. You know, if you remember Photoplay and 15 fan magazines. So I got invited one time to go on a hayride with people like Yvette Mimeo and Fabian and you know a bunch of people like that. And I met Burt Reynolds. This is the first time Burt and I met each other. And I had a flask of bourbon in my pocket, and I met Burt. And Burt and I didn't want to ride on the hay wagon. We wanted horses, you know. So we went and we said, "Can we ride horses?" You know. And the guy said, "Yeah, sure, you guys can ride along with the hay wagon. We'll take pictures and everything." Well, Burt and I killed that little flask that I had, and we wound up jumping from the horse onto the hay wagon and doing, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff like this. And then they had a little party afterwards, and Burt and I became very close friends. And Burt said to me, he said, "You know what?" He says, "Within a year from now, you and I are each going to have a television series." And I looked at him and said, "Are you nuts? Who would give us a television series?" On the same day that Riverboat started, Laramie started, and we had lunch together on the Universal lot.